Hey guys, welcome back to Unlearn with Bianca. If you're tuning in for the first time, then welcome. On this podcast, we explore everything around self-healing, health, personal growth, the mind-body connection, relationships, and more. Today, I'm very lucky to be sitting down talking to Liz Allen. Liz is a coach. She is a mind-body practitioner. And like me, she also runs the Lightning Process training. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you, Bianca. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's just jump straight into it. I really want to have conversations around the mind-body connection, the brain, change, and the nervous system, because that is what we are passionate about. That is what we teach. And I think you guys will find it really fascinating. So Liz, do you want to just share a little bit more about yourself and how you got into this field?
Yes, I'd love to. So I wasn't always doing this work. I had my own health journey and experience of chronic illness, which is, I think, how most people find themselves really taking that step and forging a new career path, having had an experience themselves. My previous career was in fashion design, actually. So very different. Yeah.
I don't think I even knew that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's quite a 180.
Well, yeah. And even I can remember back when I was, living life as like in my late 20s, working in fashion. I was socializing. I'm a salsa dancer, so I used to dance 10 hours a week, and I was really living like life at, pretty fast pace, but I thought it was, everything was going fine until one day I got a virus, and actually had a couple of kind of viruses, but then, one day couldn't get out of bed. And this is back in 2017, and I didn't understand what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
I went back to the GP, and after a couple of weeks doing tests, she diagnosed me with post-viral fatigue. And she said, and if this continues, for 6 months, it'll be chronic fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And it did. I ended up having to quit my job, move back home with my mum to be cared for. I couldn't actually leave the house to even do a food shop. I was that debilitated. And like anyone in that position, it's challenging.
It turns your life upside down.
Totally does. And while my friends were out, getting married, having babies, I was really in a completely different place, just trying to survive the day, which, that physiological health stuff's really, be it the body pains, fatigue, really hard stuff. But then the emotional impact that has is huge and not recognized, probably enough, particularly from other people who maybe connect with people who are going through chronic illness. It's hard to explain that to somebody who hasn't necessarily been through that.
Completely. Thank you so much for sharing. So were these symptoms, how long were they lasting for? I'm just curious because I haven't actually heard your story in too much detail.
So if I think back to it, literally getting through the day was a challenge. And while they were varying, I knew that if I would, be up to going even outside to do a walk around the block, that would most likely end, if I'd pushed it too much, to end in a crash, which could go on for days or even weeks. Difficult conversations would be like opportunities to run patterns of symptoms, which when I can reflect back, understanding now what I know about the impact of stressors and the mind-body connection and the nervous system, it makes sense. But when you're going through that initially and you don't have that knowledge base or understanding, it is super challenging.
So much so. And you're so right about it being, there's already so much we could talk about, that emotional stress of chronic illness on top of the physical, and having to attempt to explain it to other people, to your workplace, to your friends, to your family, when you actually don't even know what's going on yourself. So yeah, I'm curious, you had these symptoms for a while, you were really stuck, and then how did it move from that place?
So I was really lucky that I had a GP who diagnosed me quite early on with post-viral fatigue. which was great in a way because I know that's something that people dealing with chronic illness struggle with, getting a really clear diagnosis. On the downside, there wasn't a really clear treatment for that. She directed me to look at nutrition and CBT psychology and pacing and things like that. But how really, she said, there's not much we can do. People have this for a long time. It's really challenging. And so I didn't like hearing that. And I took things into my own hands in the way of, well, I'm going to research and I'm going to see what else is out there. And that sent me down the path of seeing a naturopath, an acupuncturist. I did lots of other different things. I'll caveat that by saying when you're dealing with these symptoms, even brain fog, I remember trying to read by books and it being even that a challenge to process information and get your head around stuff. And this went on for months and months and months. And, all these things did in some way help me. They all made a little bit of a change, which was great, but I was still sick. Unable to really live the life that I wanted to be living, really, monitoring and pacing and, living very, very limited life. I remember, I think it was about the October of that year, and I was with my family and my aunt passed me an article and she said, Liz, read this. It's about chronic fatigue. And I remember reading this article and it was actually about this thing called the Lightning Process. And I remember reading it this article and the first time and literally pushing it away. And I remember the visceral experience of reading this, what in my mind at the time was too good to be true. My thoughts were like, this sounds too good to be true. It can't be that easy. These people don't understand what I've been going through.
You don't know how hard this is. You don't.
Yes.
Don't tell me this is in my mind.
Yes. And I let it pass me by.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness. A month later, in fact, I ran into an old friend I'd known at high school and we were catching up, having this conversation. I told her what had been going on for me. And I remember her saying, oh, I had CFS. I did the Lightning process to get better. And I was like, what? I couldn't quite, believe her until we had this conversation and she told me about her experience. And I had remembered, wow, this is this thing I read about only a month ago. And now I have a friend who's actually done it. And she's back working and living her life and she's about to get married. And that's what I want to be back in my life.
Yeah.
Coincidentally or not, within the same week, my sister had spoken to an old friend that she'd known who had chronic fatigue and done the Lightning process. And I spoke to him in this 1 week, and these two conversations really changed everything in my mind. I saw that these two people had what I had and have moved forward in their life. So it was possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started my research. I was like, okay, I'm going to look at this. I'm you can't see this, but I'm like typing on my imaginary keyboard right now, doing my Googling, doing my researching. And I looked at it and I looked into the mind-body connection and into neuroplasticity. And I was like,
do you mind if I ask what year this was in?
This is in 2017.
Okay. So still kind of not something that you'd come across on Instagram. I don't even know if Instagram was the thing, but it wasn't everywhere.
Definitely not. And back then it was something that could only be done in person. Mm-hmm. So I remember tracking down a Lightning Process Practitioner in Australia. And at that time there was only one. And I finally reached out to Ian. And I remember, at that time, so I'm based in Sydney in Australia, and he was running a training in person in Melbourne. And in my mind, getting to Melbourne was half the battle. I was like, how am I even going to get to Melbourne for this training seminar over 3 days? I can't even confidently go and do a food shop. This is a challenge in itself. for someone with fatigue issues. But I thought, no, I just need to reach out. And so I did, because I had this belief that this is going to be the thing. And when Ian finally got back to me, he said, I remember, great. That's great. You want to do it. Unfortunately, I'm fully booked. And this is my last training. I'm going on a sabbatical for a year. Good luck. And my heart sank. And I remember this piece of news, even like 2 days it took me to kind of recover from this shattering news when I thought I found the thing, and suddenly it was no longer available to me. Luckily, I remembered my friend Kat. She'd actually been to New Zealand to do the lightning processes. There are a number of amazing practitioners in New Zealand. And so I thought in my mind, well, if that's what she did, then that's what I have to do. And somehow in my mind, getting to New Zealand was easier than getting to Melbourne, because part of my mindset was, well, New Zealand's travel and I love to travel.
That's interesting.
I know. And suddenly I was like, oh, I know how to do that. I know how to book a flight. I know how to book an Airbnb. And I was lucky. I found these amazing hosts. So I contacted a practitioner, signed up to do the LP in Christchurch in New Zealand. And I remember looking at where the training venue was and then finding an Airbnb and like calculating the distance I would have to walk to get from door to door, because these details when you have fatigue issues are top of mind.
Completely. I'd say almost every fatigue client I have is always worried about completing day one as well. Like, will I get through? I can't get through an hour, let alone 4.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I was, fortunate. I found these beautiful Airbnb hosts, and I picked them because particularly as well, they were tango dancers. And as a salsa dancer, I was like, oh, I know dance people. These people are going to be great hosts. And it felt like safe in some way. And they were beautiful. They picked me up from the airport and took me back to their home, past the supermarket so I could buy some fresh fruit and veggies. And we got back, and I remember day one of the lightning process and turning up to this training seminar, which before you go onto this, you don't really know what it is, right, that you're about to learn. But essentially the lightning process, which I'm sure we'll go into more, but it's essentially a training program that teaches you how to change the way your brain is influencing your body to help essentially resolve chronic illness and particular stuckness in your life. And what's really interesting is on day one, you learn the tools, right? And so it's not just at the end that you start making changes. It's really from day one. And part of the training is really about putting what you learn into practice. And one of the key pieces of homework and tasks that I set my clients is to do something different. Something when they leave day one of the training to go out and do something different. And my experience of this was I got home to my Airbnb, my tango, the hosts, these tango teachers, they asked me, Liz, do you want to come with us tonight? We're going out.
Really? Did they know you were doing chronic fatigue before that?
Yeah. I mean, they picked me up from the airport in quite a state, and took me home. So they knew, but they asked me this. And it was in that moment, I remember I was thinking, this is my yes moment. I need to say yes. And I did. And I used what I just learned, putting it into practice. And I went with them and I danced. And I mean, honestly, I'd never danced tango before. I knew salsa, and so I knew how to follow. They gave me a couple of lessons in their home. These people had dance floor in their home, my dream. But
well, you obviously were meant to stay there.
I know.
Oh, that is amazing.
It was a really beautiful experience, because not only did I stay out with them all night dancing tango, and I was using the tools the whole time. They took me past the Christmas lights in Christchurch on the way home. We had this great time.
There would be just a few houses. I don't think we've got, there's not a whole lot of Christmas.
Well, it was like very exciting for me at the time because it was very different. I hadn't been out at night in months. So it might seem like a little change for some people.
It felt like
It felt like New York. Exactly. It was huge for me. And I remember the bit I remember most is waking up the next morning. And I remember waking up hungry, so hungry, like I hadn't been hungry in months. It was like my digestive system had switched back on. And I really got it. I really understood. I was like, wow, I get how this works. I've just shown myself that if I do this work consistently, what I've just been taught, I can do this stuff. And so I came back into the training on day 2, really thinking to myself, well, fatigue's done. I know how to do that or not do that. And so my mind went straight to, wow, like how can I use what I've just learned on chronic pain from an old sports injury that I thought I had to live with? How can I use this on the garlic intolerance that I've thought I had to live with? And my mind started to really expand on these things that I hadn't actually recognized in my life that I could change. And now I really saw, wow, there's actually a whole new way to move forward that previously I wasn't even aware of or available to.
Completely. I had a similar experience. I did the Lightning process in 2014. So, that's coming up a decade. And sometimes, like, talking about it like this, that's when I really connect back to, wow, there was this, like, it's almost like a clarity that I just never had. I was like, I've been seeing the world in a completely different way. Like, you can have that really big shift in how you perceive reality, right? And our physiology can respond so quickly. So you've kind of got me at a point where I want to ask multiple questions, but before we get into what you learned on the training and the key takeaways that you took from the Lightning process, I want to ask how long you were using the tools for. And obviously, further down the track, you did recover. How long did it take you, and what did it look like after the training?
Yeah. So I was really keen to get really quick change. I was like, I've, had, for me, I think it was about 10 months that I had chronic fatigue. That was enough. For anyone who's had it, you wouldn't wish this on your worst enemy. It is a really debilitating experience, but people have this for months and years and really even decades. So it's not fun, a place to hang out in. And so I'd heard stories about what other people had achieved. And I was like, I want to be one of them. That's me. I want that. And I remember, like, when I left for New Zealand, I had this idea in my mind before I'd even got on the course. I'd had this idea in my mind that I want to, oh my God, I'm going to get emotional about this because it's such a powerful moment for me. I want to walk back into Sydney Airport and see my mom and be like, Mom, I'm back. I'm healed. We're done. And it is something that's so powerful when you have those moments of shift, those moments of realizing that it's possible and things can change. And it did. And I remember visualizing that before I'd even learned the tools of the Lightning process, and that's one of the things we teach our clients is really how to utilize that to really influence what's going on for them, and also how they're anticipating the future, which is really important. And so I'd already planned for my success mentally rehearsed that without not even realizing that's what I'd been doing. And for me, what recovery looked like was, I needed to use the tools a lot. You do. Like any training, you need to put them into practice, particularly in those challenging moments, which there were. And I remember having, one of the goals I set myself was I wanted to run a 10K. And that training post Lightning process was my way to, put my tools into practice and use that. And this was not only overcoming fatigue, but also overcoming chronic pain. It's actually why I started dancing, because dancing didn't cause me pain. I had had a touch football injury. I had 4 screws put in my foot, and I'd always had pain and couldn't run anymore.
Mhm.
And so getting back to running was a really big deal for me. And I remember 4 months after doing my training with the Lightning Process, I ran a 10K. Um,
Mm.
yeah. And on this goals list, 6 months after doing the Lightning Process as a client, I hiked the Camino de Santiago in Spain, and I hiked 250 kilometers over 10 days in the north of Spain. And it was really me. I did it solo, and it was this experience of kind of a gift to myself to be, this is what I would love to do, and I'm capable and I can. And it was a beautiful kind of way that I was able to, yeah, reach that
Reclaim.
goal and reclaim my life. Yeah.
Amazing, like incredible. Obviously, as practitioners now, both of us, we get to witness some of these amazing stories quite consistently. So sometimes because you get used to it, you forget how incredible it is. Um, but yeah, I want to talk on the lightning process itself quickly, or the mind body connection in general and the premise of it, because people listening might be like, I don't understand. I still don't understand what you're doing or how you're doing it. And to give you some context very quickly, I have brought up the lightning process on other episodes, so I won't go into it in too much detail, but it is a 3 half-day training. And as practitioners, we teach our clients about the mind body connection. Like Liz said, how we can learn to use our brain differently so it fires different signals to our nervous system, to our body. We can change our physiology. So, utilizing the mind body connection. It is a training, meaning that we teach tools, almost like we're working when we work with our clients, we're almost like doing the gym plan, but for the brain. And then the clients go off and use these tools consistently, like you would go to the gym. So, Liz, thinking about your experience, thinking about your clients, thinking about just general information you have learned, what are some things that you believe people need to understand about change or about the mind body connection? Because for us, this stuff is become normalized, but there's so much wisdom that I think we can share around change.
Yeah, totally. It's so true. We see this all the time. Huge changes. And when you're not exposed to that, and you're coming from a place of stuckness and challenge and really trying to work through your problem, quite often you don't have that exposure. And so you don't know what's possible. And I think that one of the really important things that I would want people to take away and know is the most simple thing, that it is possible to recover, to move forward, to be where you want to be. Even in those moments when it feels like that. How could she even say that?
Mhm.
Right? Because actually, what we believe, our beliefs are so important. I love talking about beliefs and the impact and power they have in our lives, in our expectations for the future. And really, it just comes down to that. Whether you believe it's possible is going to impact on your success.
Completely. And a bit of science behind that as well. Both myself and Liz said how for quite a while we were really hesitant to take something like the lightning process or to look into the mind body connection because our beliefs weren't aligned with it is possible to change, it is possible to heal. But when you get enough evidence in another direction and you hear of people's success, or just generally speaking, you hear of change, you start to open up a bit. And then eventually, if you continue to look for evidence in the other direction, we have something called a reticular activating system, which starts to find more evidence to support that belief, to strengthen that neurology, and our beliefs can shift. And I also believe that having a belief aligned with what we want is the first step to change because nothing can happen until our beliefs are aligned.
Yeah, totally. Such a great point.
Mm.
Question for you. What
Go
would you
for it.
say to the people listening who, know that we're both practitioners
Mm.
and, hear us say, well, you have to like believe, surely that sounds like a marketing ploy or what would you, because I think about this and how people might perceive it, having been on the other side of it
Yeah,
and
yeah.
hearing, people, trying to promote what they do, which obviously, we have conversations so people find out about what we do and they may be skeptical to be, well, why are they saying this? Are they just trying to get me to buy something?
Yeah. Do you mean in terms of like you have to believe it for it to work
Mm,
kind of thing? Yeah. Well, I have a belief that uh put it this way, I believe that the right people and the right timing will align. So I personally used to focus a lot of my energy on, will my message come across right? Will they hear this right? But I think, first of all, I think personal experience does speak volumes. Second of all, I think having been chronically sick myself, I do believe that it's okay to have a tiny little bit of like doubt, just a little bit, as long as you're open to learning and open to listening and to asking questions and to understand a different perspective. Because I know for sure when I at one point in my life I wasn't, and then I became open, and it happened more gradually. But yeah, I really think it again is around focusing our energy and thinking not everyone has to believe in the work we do or believe they're well. People might, some people may find ways out of chronic illness that are completely unrelated to this, and perhaps they don't have to change their beliefs, and that's fine too. But I think if we stand strong in what we believe, I think certain people that are ready to look at a different perspective naturally come on board.
totally. And
Mm.
definitely, I love what you pointed out there about that state in which you approach. You said open, and curiosity there is so useful
Mm.
to be available to new information is, I think, such an important way to move forward. And how
Yeah.
people can find themselves stuck is when they're, continue to do what they've been doing and nothing changes. And so it really does take looking at your own stuff. And it's all like really your own stuff, your internal dialogue, your thoughts, your beliefs, what's going on internally is where the answer is
Yeah.
way more than externally. And when you come from that place of curiosity, open to information, available for change, and you do your research and you look at the science behind the mind body connection and you hear and like really listen to the people who have achieved what they want and how did they do that? What was
Yeah.
their mindset? What were they thinking? And how did they do that? And you start to find links and success leaves clues.
And I think there's been a massive shift in the last few years of people's open mindedness. I don't know if COVID had anything to do with that and people just looking in new directions, but I really see a shift happening in terms of people's openness to different things. And like you said, this is science. It is science. The mind body connection. It's a thing. It's a real thing. I believe as well that naturally in society, Western society, we from a young age we are just sort of taught to listen to everyone else outside of us. So of course we're going to be skeptical when someone comes along and says, there are some answers within and we have to look at our internal dialogue and our posture and our breath and there's more. Naturally, I think you're going to come up with quite a lot because that's not how we're taught to think. So it takes again that level of curiosity to think like what could be possible and where can I go searching to find evidence that this may be possible. And I really like to meet my clients where they are at. And if they're not ready, if they want more information, I don't think it's our job to persuade anyone. It's purely just to show people the science and to encourage them to find the right thing that fits for them as well. So I want to talk more about the science of the mind body connection and different elements around retraining the brain, regulating the nervous system that we can help explain a little bit more on. So, yeah, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm love talking about the mind body connection, particularly the power of the brain, and recognizing how we have way more influence than we could ever imagine. When you think about it, your body has an innate intelligence inside of it that actually it knows how to heal. You don't have to tell it how to do that. It knows how to have a baby. Man, how does that even work? But
So true.
our bodies are amazing. You know, when you get a paper cut 3 days later, what's happened? Well, that's healed. And you didn't have to do anything. It did that. That is its natural state. It has a tendency towards health. And if that's not healing, then what it would indicate is something's getting in the way. And quite often, what I find with clients is a lot of what's been getting in the way are these unconscious automatic patterns, responses, ways of thinking that are influencing our body and our physiologies in not very useful ways. So, particularly what I see here is this activation of the sympathetic nervous system, which is a really important system, but meant for the short term. And we see this when it's activated chronically long term, that stress response, that it actually plays up and influences the physiology in not very useful ways. And what we draw in here in terms of understanding, well, what's our brain got to do here? Well, our brain's a superpower for one of the, arguably the most powerful part of our body. And so understanding how that can be working for us is great, but also understanding how it can be working against us. And bringing in here our understanding of really neuroplasticity is that our brain will continue to change depending on how it's being used. And I think a beautiful way to explain this for people who might not have an understanding of neuroplasticity is imagine a field of grass and you walk through that field one day, you come back the next day and you take the same way. And you do that enough times that it's no longer a field of grass, it's a well-worn track. So much so that now when you go to that field, you just end up on the other side without even realizing that you took that track. It's just your end point. And if you've ever had that experience of driving a car and you end up at your destination kind of thinking, how did I even get here? You know, it's that amazing ability of your brain to put this really complex processes into automatic functioning. And it's really useful. It's how we do modern life. But where this becomes really unuseful is if what we've made unconscious and automatic, not useful for us. And so if what's become unconscious and automatic is this activated stress response, not only is it difficult to spot, it's difficult to change. And this is how people really end up in this really stuck place, really when this is operating at an unconscious level. So really what we're looking at with the lightning process training is really raising that level of awareness to be able to recognize and spot, not when you're at the end of the field, but really come back to the beginning of that field, recognize, the path you can take. And also, most importantly, that there is a choice there that maybe you hadn't been aware of before. And given that choice, most people are going to choose something that's really positive and life enhancing. And then it's about teaching them the tools to be able to retrain that as the new unconscious automatic pathway, that are going to promote health in their bodies, happiness, joy, love, all of that stuff that's really activating that parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes your digestion, your clear thinking, your healing and immune function. And it's not about the lightning process fixing people. It's really about teaching them the tools so they can heal themselves. And one of the interesting ways I've heard it described is it's radical personal responsibility, which sounds pretty extreme when you put it like that. But it's also really empowering because we see people come from this stuck place of being in this system where they are a patient, that they can't influence what's going on, they can't change things. And that's a really challenging place to be. And what I see is helping people to shift into a place of empowerment and recognizing actually there is choice here. They are more influential than they know. Teaching them these really clear tools to be able to identify when they're running this not very useful neurology that's affecting their physiology in not very useful ways, and then be able to do something different that's going to promote health and lead to positive physiological changes in their body is huge. It's about like empowerment, and that is really, in my opinion, such a key part of health and recovery.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's crazy to me that these tools that we teach around coaching, visualization, identifying automated patterns that are no longer serving us, um, coaching, did I say coaching? Language. These aren't commonplace things that we learn from a young age. So, but the ability for us to change, generally speaking, or change if we are doing, we say doing chronic illness is huge. It's way more than we are taught and we know. We're taught to know.
Yes, totally. And I think what was really, and I remember being way back when I was a client, like pre-client, when I was actually in the really suffering chronic illness phase. I remember thinking to myself, oh, like I just want a manual. I just want someone to tell me, like, how do I get out of this? And so, in a way, when I found out about this work, the Lightning Process, it was a bit of music to my ears in that, oh, this, is actually a really clear set of tools that if I recognize I can, apply these tools with consistency and do that, then yeah, this is something that I have influence over and I can move forward. And the tools themselves are, yeah, really powerful. And the way I like to describe it, it's far side simplicity in that there's actually a whole lot going on, but it's made very simple,
Yeah.
which is what you want. It doesn't have to be complex.
Especially when you're stuck, you don't have the mental capacity to be taking on a whole lot of information to make it super, super complex. I think basic is good. It's taught me a long time to learn that, but I really think simple is good because when things are simple, that's when we tend to use them. I'm really curious, as we're sitting here talking about this, reflecting on my experience and my clients. I often find that there's these underlying, yes, there's the symptoms that we get on top of, but there's these patterns that we've been running for quite a long time. If we look back to how we were operating, say pre-stuckness, pre-illness, and then post. So for example, myself personally, I really had to unlearn or retrain out of people pleasing. I had to really look at ways I was putting pressure on myself, perfectionism. I was running a lot of patterns that I had to shift over time. And of course, we're human. Things can pop up time to time, but it's not until I look back and I'm like, wow, I've really changed some of those automated patterns because I constantly now have a new choice point and I can make a new choice. I visualize about the future in a positive way. And there's so many things that become automated when you have these tools to retrain the brain and the body. But back to those shifts, what did you notice? What did you have to let go of? What were some of your limiting patterns on the other side of chronic illness that you can now look back at and think, wow, yeah, that really forced me to look within and change some things?
Yeah, it's such a good point. And it's, such a nice reflection point to look back. And I mean, from this side, it's really obvious, right, to us.
Really trying to get into the heads of people listening and just like, because I know what it's like when you're sitting there thinking, I have no idea what the people are talking about.
Yeah.
Another realm. So I want to pull it back to basics. So
Yes.
yeah, if you've got any wisdom to share.
All the wisdom I'd love to share too. And I think about this myself also, those patterns. And we see patterns in the patterns, right? When you mentioned people pleasing, I was like, yep. You mentioned perfectionism. I was like, oh yeah, that was me. Overachieving, type A stuff, but with a drive that actually it's never good enough. That was something that I had to unlearn. One of the things that, we identify is that, and I talk to my clients about, is while it might, and I talk about getting a health and life back, because really that's what people want. They're like, I just want to get my health and life back. But actually, we don't want to go back to just before you got unwell, because there was something operating there in terms of like the way you were living your life and those internal mechanisms that actually led you down that path to then, get sick, do sick.
Hard pill to swallow.
Can be.
It can be, but you want to think of, on the other side, there is an even better life. There's even a more authentic you.
Totally. Yeah. And if I think back to those patterns, only now do I see, oh my gosh, man, was I hard on myself. And actually, back then, I didn't realize. And you don't realize these things when you're in it, because like when that saying, whatever, you can't, when you're in the forest, right, and deep in it, you can't see the wood from the trees. All you see is the wood in front of you. You can't actually see that you're in this forest. Like when you're running your own, limiting patterns, or like negative self-talk, or talking to yourself, and maybe, I used to be a real bitch to myself, but I didn't realize that. It was only when a friend kind of pointed out something to me that I was like, oh, wait, what? Because it was so because it was just normal. It was my normal reality. And it's hard to see that when you're in it, which is why being able to gain a perspective, or have an outside perspective or a coach to help reflect and show you, some of these patterns and see this play out, that it's very hard, I think, to move yourself out of that place by yourself because being your own limiting patterns, or particularly limiting beliefs, which I see at the cornerstone of stuckness, is that you can't actually often recognize your own limiting beliefs. They don't show up as beliefs to you. They show up as your truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And even for us, both of us as practitioners, there'd be multiple beliefs that other people would spot. That for all of us, I think it's so important to have that support, have that coaching for any change we're trying to make in our life. I think with the lightning process as well, one thing that I think there's a bit of a misconception around is that it's just shifting your belief and it's thinking positive, and it's definitely not. It's really understanding the science behind change, but there's so much around the body as well, and connecting to calmer states in the body. We use breath, we use posture, we draw on parts, which is NLP process. There's so much in it where we can take it to different depths if we need. And for me, I love the fact that the process is simple, but there's so much that we can do with it with practitioners too, and really enhance it with our clients.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And quite often people want to distinguish between, oh, it's the mind thing, and oh, no, it's the body thing. And really, where we come from is that you can't actually separate. You can't just say it's the body or just say it's the mind. It's mind body. Everything is both. And that's our approach, and why it's really important to understand, like, basically why we love the mind body connection, love talking about it, is because it is all encompassing. And when you realize and recognize that, there you can make huge shifts.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So as we start to round this out, have you got any client stories that you would love to share just to inspire the listeners? Is there anything that stands out for you?
I have so many.
I wouldn't personally want to be asked that question, so don't reflect that one back on me.
I know, because there are so many beautiful stories. I I just feel so privileged that I get to work with so many beautiful humans. And when you
Mm.
do this work, it is such beautiful change work that you see someone transform right in front of your eyes. And I often think, oh man, I really should get them to take a before and after photo
I said
because,
on Instagram last week. So
oh, did you?
before and afters. Yeah, I say it's like a natural Botox. I haven't had Botox myself. I think it actually works in the opposite way because Botox freezes, but your whole face changes, right?
Yes.
You look relaxed. You start to glow. You start to, I don't know, your posture, everything.
And when you think, and we see this, like, and we do training in a group. And so everyone else in the group sees these other people in front of their eyes starting to have the color come back into their skin. They start to see the eyes, they start to sparkle as the smile comes back across their face, which, maybe just a couple of days ago was very flat, very monotone without that sense of life. So witnessing this beautiful, transformation in front of your eyes is so beautiful. And we see this like all the time with clients. So it's those things, those positive changes, those things like people start to notice. I had one client come back in, I think it was on day 2 or day 3 of the training. We talked positive changes. And she said, we hear all different stuff. Like I was able to go on this walk and this run, for people who've had, not been able to do that, that's huge. But I had this one lady come back and say, I went on this walk and I looked at this garden and I saw color.
Mm-hmm.
Like I hadn't seen color in years. And it's this opening and availability and sense of presence to the world around you, where if you've been really focused with your neurology in a certain way, in pain, in suffering, that you just haven't been available. If you've been your neurology's been running patterns, in a very different way, that's just not been available to you. And I just like hearing things like that is just beautiful. Some of my favorite client stories are the Lightning Process babies. The amount of like people who have gone on to have babies who have that just has been one of their major goals and just hasn't been a possibility or available to them. And when you think about the nervous system, and the state you want to be in, one of the systems that gets affected is your fertility system. When you're activated in that heightened sympathetic state, that doesn't function in the way that it's meant to. And so when people's systems rebalance, the body's rebalance, the natural body's ability to heal, to function appropriately, rebalances. And these things are, beautiful to share, to witness. And so many beautiful stories.
Completely agree. It's amazing. I know, such a privilege to be able to be a part of people's journeys, knowing that we're empowering other people to influence. We're not really doing a lot apart from passing on some tools and getting to see people. I think it's reclaim their power, which is the most powerful thing to witness, knowing that they're doing it for themselves and they're starting to build that trust back in their mind and body. Because for me personally, that was something that was gone for a long period of time. And I would say anyone that's had stuckness, chronic mental, physical symptoms, we start to lose that trust in ourselves, and it can come back for sure.
Totally. I see that self-trust and rebuilding that relationship with self is such an important part of the healing journey. I hear you downplay there, Bianca, like the role you play in somebody else's journey, going, oh, just teaching some tools and it's just passing on knowledge. I'm actually going to call you on that because
Yeah.
actually, I believe that, yes, it's knowledge is important. These tools are transformational, but it's also support to help you, and recognizing that you don't need to do this alone, creating a space where for people to be able to, say the things that they've actually never said. out loud or express themselves or have insights reflected back to them, and holding space and guiding someone in that way, I don't think it's a small thing.
Yeah, no, you are right. It can be quite rare for people to feel safe in someone's presence. I think as practitioners, and yeah, I will speak for myself because I do believe that is one of my strengths. So thank you for coaching me on that.
I didn't need to coach you on it.
I really wanted to emphasize that I like how we help people find their power, but you are right. The support, and which for me personally comes naturally. I am so grateful that I can be someone that people trust with their, we'll say, stuff.
Yeah, because actually everyone's got stuff, and you know that warmth you demonstrate, and I know just how what an amazing coach you are, and how you help and guide and support people is beautiful. And so it's, people need to know that, and you're obviously not going to say it yourself, so I want to make sure that that people understand that it is just more than tools. It is about actually that journey of feeling safe, feeling like building trust, having what it modeled, what it is to express certainty, love, self-love, and be really kind to yourself. And having a practitioner, I think, to guide you real time is one of the key strengths of the Lightning process, where other online self-coaching programs, I think they miss the mark on that. And I do believe that there is, some value in that. But where I see real effective, quick change come is when you can make real time feedback and course correct, because actually change can happen really quickly, but not while you continue to run old patterns.
Yeah, I agree. And just knowing that someone is there for you to answer questions, to walk you through it. Often, and I will say, people that do, like, you actually circle back right to what we said at the start, the people that get into this work usually don't do it by choice. Usually it has been through their own experience. And I say that because it's quite a random field to get into for a start. But it usually is because we want to give back and really, really believe in what we're doing and have been there. So, yeah, this has been a beautiful conversation. And I really hope that people listening, wherever you're at on your journey, if you have a lot of knowledge about the mind-body connection, if you're completely new, I hope you've really taken something away. Liz, where can people find you, and who are you working with at the moment? What's on the go for you?
Yeah, so I'm based in Sydney, Australia, and you can find me via my website, which is rewirewellbeing.com. I'm also on Instagram, again, Rewire Wellbeing, one word. So I train with people in Australia for the Lightning process. I'm one of 3 practitioners here. And then I also do one-on-one NLP coaching for worldwide.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you so much, Bianca. It's beautiful chatting with you.
You too. See you guys on the next episode.